Ooh, welcome on into the Fantasy Football Forge. My name is Steve, and it is time for another mock draft insert day of the week. What are we doing? Wednesday evenings or something like that? Welcome on in. If this is your first time, it's just like any normal mock draft Monday, just a different day of the week to help fill in the gap. So, in this mock draft, I wanted to look at a few things. Really curious about where these quarterbacks end up landing throughout free agency, throughout the offseason. And I wanted to take a stab at that and see how that could influence the draft and see if also part of this was a quarterback falling, at least one. I don't think both Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders will fall, and I think we know which one's more likely to fall into maybe a more appropriate draft position. But I wanted to look at that as well. This framework began shortly after Daniel Jeremiah came out with his top 50, so there are going to be some influences from there, and we're going to start out by just going through the first round. You can see I already have it drafted out. There are trades in here. I'll walk you through the trades, but this first round I wanted to move through a little bit quicker so that we could get into the second round, and I just want to introduce you to some players. We're going to hear about these first-round guys so much throughout the offseason that, it's good to get familiarized with some of the other guys as well. So we're going to spend some time doing that today. Without further ado, the draft does start with Cam Ward. Try not cheating ahead too much here. I know it's going to be tempting, but Tennessee Titans are going to have Cam Ward. I just want to walk you through. So the available quarterbacks in this scenario, as we know, Aaron Rodgers not going to be with along with the Jets anymore. This was created before that news, but luckily I did not have him retain. I shouldn't say luckily here. That's common. Retain as the quarterback of the New York Jets. And I also didn't have him going to a team. There's very few situations that might work for him, and in this scenario I didn't have that going through. So I kind of have Aaron Rodgers maybe being available in case there's an injury in the offseason during the season to a competitive team that he can come in and help. Other quarterbacks, Daniel Jones available, Sam Darnold, Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, Russell Wilson, and Kirk Cousins all being available to teams in one form or another. And here we're going to have the Cleveland Browns going to be taking Justin Fields off of the out of free agency and planning on rolling with him to some extent. Maybe there'll be some other plans too at quarterback. That's going to be the case with a lot of these. New York Giants going to use Kirk Cousins in here as a bridge quarterback for the year. Get him from Atlanta, of course. And then maybe they have their eyes on a different quarterback as well in the draft. Maybe they have like a 2-year span here to prove that they're the duo for the future. Otherwise, Mara's going to move on from them. Las Vegas Raiders going to end up with Sam Darnold in this situation. Maybe not feeling too comfortable, Tom Brady, with the guys in the draft and or their likelihood too of nailing if there is one that they're interested in, and looking towards the future. I could see him bowing for I could see him saying like, hey, let's go the route of Sam Darnold. So I could see that making sense. I think when it comes to the quarterback situation in Las Vegas, he's probably going to have a decent amount of sway too. New York Jets going to go with Russell Wilson and, to be determined, we'll show you later in the draft, Pittsburgh Steelers, Daniel Jones for the Pittsburgh Steelers, and we'll see. Maybe it's just going to go with Daniel Jones. And then the Minnesota Vikings going to take Zach Wilson. Does that seem familiar, right? And J.J. McCarthy moving forward with that duo. So hopefully J.J. McCarthy healthy early on in the season, if not to begin the season. But either way, Zach Wilson's going to join there as the backup, maybe early season starter. And there we have our quarterback situations figured out. I will try as relevant to point out whenever a quarterback is drafted if they already have somebody else on their roster as well. So Cam Ward goes first overall. Second, we're going to see Abdul Carter go to Cleveland. That makes a lot of sense, especially now with the news, which was not available at the time of making this draft, of the edge rusher situation there for Myles Garrett. And that did not end up factoring into this draft. So it is what it is. There's no guarantees that anything will happen with that, to be perfectly honest. Jacksonville Jaguars moving up from pick 5 to 3. New York Jets looked at the board, said, we're okay moving down if you're giving us something nice here. And remember, the New York Giants going with Kirk Cousins. So we've got a plan here that's in action for the New York Giants. Ultimately, I wrote, now they're armed with picks 34 and 36 in the second round, and the Giants can take insert quarterback. We'll get to that. Let's save that for a little bit. They moved up for Travis Hunter, Jacksonville Jaguars. could make plenty of sense. They need that kind of help. And so, maybe not the organization that always moves up in drafts, but we'll have them do that here in this scenario. And then the New England not messing around, not trading back, just going to take Will Campbell. They need help along that offensive line. I think regardless of what they do during the offseason, I think they'll still need help because I don't think they're bringing in 4 new bodies along that offensive line. So unless they do that in free agency, which would be hella expensive, there's still going to be room to add more. The New York Giants here at pick 5 going to go with Umanmielen. I think that's a wonderful pairing with their current room there in the wide receiver room, and just makes for an absolute threat for whoever their quarterback of the future may or may not be, but also for Kirk Cousins for the time being. And then at pick 6, Ashton Jeanty to Las Vegas. Sorry, Las Vegas fan, I'll do something different sooner or later, but I do think that this makes some sense. Remember, you've got Sam Darnold, so we want him to feel comfortable. We saw what happens when he doesn't feel comfortable anymore, and so Ashton Jeanty going to be the scenario here where we're going to go. Umanmielen off the board. Mason Graham to the Jets at pick 7, and then James Pearce to Carolina pick 8. Mike Green, edge rusher, going to the New Orleans Saints. Armand Membou going to Miami. So Miami trading up, Chicago trading back. Here I've got Armand Membou, very well might be the second best offensive lineman in this class. Miami, of all teams, would know how much San Francisco would or would not like him because they have very similar opinions on players and needs for their systems. They're very intrinsically tied there, Miami and San Francisco. So if they think it's worth it, they're going to jump ahead of San Francisco in this case, at least. They do think it's worth it, and take Armand Membou, which leaves Kelvin Banks for San Francisco, and they're probably okay with that, but maybe they would have preferred Armand Membou, maybe not. That's going to bring us on to pick 12, Walter Nolen, good run stuffer. They need that in Dallas. And then that brings, of course, Chicago on. Tyler Booker, this is where we're going to see a little bit of that Daniel Jeremiah twist coming in here, and I do think this also helps to inspire my next mock draft, which the framework is already done for, and maybe some changes will have to happen based on news that we get in the meantime. But I think if you need a guard in this draft, reaching a little bit, getting them in the first round over interior defensive linemen, over edge rushers, could make some sense because it's a deep class when it comes to edge rushers and defensive linemen. Sorry, my cat's going to ruin the sound, and we don't need that because this is a longer video and I don't want to record it twice. And then Tyler Booker, though, is one of these guys who a lot of people have like a second-round draft grade on. I do, but also apparently might be higher on for scout circles for the NFL draft. Might be somebody who's going to be going higher than I guess we suspect in the draft community. Pick 14, Malachi Starks going to Indianapolis. Wanted to do something a little bit different, something that could still happen. Malachi Starks, I think this is as early as he should be going, but it's possible. Some people love him. Tyler Warren, pick 15, we're going to see Atlanta. They need more capital in this draft. They don't have a lot. Denver has their eye on someone that they do not want to let get away. I've done this, I think, just on Monday's draft too, similar. I had them actually jump to pick 13, so I'll try not doing this too much more in the meantime, in the short term. But they jump up to get Tyler Warren, Atlanta, a team who I think will be very much have their phones open here to move back, if possible, from pick 15 due to their limited capital. Will Johnson going to Arizona at 16. Like, if he's available, Arizona at 16, depending on what the board is, I think it's very likely that they would be willing to grab him. And then Jahdae Barron, or maybe they'd prefer Jahdae Barron, because I do. Jahdae Barron going to Cincinnati here. I think that's a really, really lovely matchup that I've done even before I started doing the mock drafts publicly here. Not like last year, this season. Has been an early choice for Cincinnati for me, based on their needs. Shamar Stewart then going to Cincinnati, going to Seattle here. Luther Burden, they need slot help. They do not have Chris Godwin. None of their slot wide receivers are currently on the roster when it comes to free agency. So Luther Burden, if they don't retain the helps of one of them, could be the guy for them. And then Jalen Walker going to Atlanta after they fell back, got some more capital. I think Atlanta fan will be happy with that, if I recall correctly. So there you go. Jalen Walker going to Atlanta. I'm not as high up on him. I don't know for sure that the NFL is or is not, but probably some teams are. So, one of those guys that I will often enough try to include in the first round. of mock drafts. We'll see as the offseason goes how that goes. But look at that, pick 21, Shedeur Sanders. I kind of ruined that surprise, my bad. But I didn't remember that was coming. Here we go. So this is the plan here for Pittsburgh, working, kind of predicting the draft here. Going to grab Daniel Jones and then Shedeur Sanders. I think that's a nice little pairing for Pittsburgh to move forward with and figure things out for. But they had Daniel Jones more than likely kind of as the backup plan and maybe starts the first week 2 or 3, but then their hope was that they would get Shedeur Sanders. They do get him. Is this Kenny Pickett all over again? We'll see, right? But, when you're always picking in the 20s, you got to work with what you got to work with, and they don't spend any capital. They get their guy here at pick 21, and hopefully it'll work out for them. I think Shedeur Sanders could make a lot of sense for Pittsburgh, as he's a guy who's not going to turn the ball over. Their focus is on their defense, doing well, shutting teams down, and they just don't want mistakes from their quarterback. That's why they did not trust Justin Fields enough. He's a guy who will make more mistakes, turn over the ball, fumble the ball. They don't want that because that just ruins the whole plan. That's not good cohesion between the defense and the offense. You want them to be complementary of each other. Shedeur Sanders, I think, is complementary of what they want to do on offense and defense alike. It brings us to pick 22, Colston Loveland, tight end. Great pick. Makes a lot of sense. We like it. They like it. Let's go. Benjamin Morrison, another one that could make plenty of sense for Green Bay Packers if they feel that they're worthy of he's worthy of taking the risk there, or maybe they don't feel like there's much risk if the medical, comes through green lights all the way. Josh Simmons going to the New York Giants. So this is going to be a trade up. The Minnesota Vikings, I've talked about this, I think, already. A team where oftentimes I look at the board and I'm willing to move back from this, depending on exactly who's available. If I'm the Minnesota Vikings, they definitely don't have to. So here, they're going to trade pick 24 for pick 34, 103, and a 2026 round 4. Part of the reason we're going to go get some future capital is because they don't necessarily need it for this year's draft. So maybe a trade that would make more sense for them to do, if New York Giants would be willing to do this at this point, would be picks 34 and 65 for Minnesota's 24 and 97. So Minnesota falls back a little ways, but then they move pick 97 up a whole round, up to pick 65. 32 picks there on the dot, right? So that could make a lot of sense too. One of those trades, whichever one teams, the both of them agree on, right? Or something else that they agree on. It really, the value doesn't matter, but I am at least letting you know what it is based on value charts. And the New York Giants have their plan in full motion here. They moved up, and they're going to get an offensive lineman to help rebuild this offensive line as well in Josh Simmons. And if you remember, they took Umanmielen with that first pick, and they have Kirk Cousins on their roster currently. That's going to bring us on to pick 25, Emeka Egbuka, wide receiver, going to Houston. Nothing original there. We don't need to talk about that. Trey Amos going to the LA Rams. They do need help with their secondary, so this is a route that would make a lot of sense for LA to go. And then Baltimore stays patient. They get Josh Conerly Jr. I think they're going to be happy with that. And going to do something a little bit different here. We know that the Detroit Lions are built on, a lot like Philadelphia here. You draft in the trenches first, and we've spent a couple of drafts here being able to ignore the trenches because we did such a good job with them for the most part, and drafting in other areas, but it's time to refocus as the cost, age, etc. all is starting to swell along that offensive line. We need to start looking into the future. Gray Zabel could definitely be that guy our needs, guard, center. Gray Zabel's the perfect guy to bring in here and fits what they want. They like the big guys there. Michael Williams, Washington. Going to take Michael Williams, somebody who probably could go in the first round. So that's what we have doing here. They need an edge rusher. And when we look at the board here, our biggest needs like wide receiver, edge, tackle, both of the tackles that we think could go in the first round did not make it here in Josh Conerly and Josh Simmons. Wide receiver, it's okay waiting. There's also Matthew Golden definitely available. I just want to do something a little bit different, a different path that they could take. Michael Williams, we can get some wide receivers second, third round. I think there's some pretty decent options there for us to go that route with. That's going to bring us on to pick 30, where we will see the New York Giants once again moving up. Look at this. New York Giants using their assets after moving down in this draft to move up a couple of times, this time securing their quarterback of the future in Jackson Dart. And this could be a thing where the Brian Daboll sees in Jackson Dart a lot of what he saw in Josh Allen. And it's fixable stuff with Jackson Dart. That's the thing here, is that Brian Daboll could say, I can fix these mechanics. I've done it before. And see a moldable piece of clay here in Jackson Dart that will secure him a long, long time in New York if things go correctly. And he's got, in this scenario, a 2-year span here to work with. We're just going, that's not based off of anything. That's just based off of a potential thing that maybe, he's been given this leash, this promise of, like, you've got 2 years. Actually, that is based on something. His contract ends after 2 years. So he's probably not going to get an extension this year, probably not going to get an extension last year. He's going to be playing for his job after that. And Jackson Dart's the bet that he's going to make. Going to go with Kirk Cousins for now. Jackson Dart, we'll sit, we'll learn, we'll work on things, and whether ready or not, he'll be playing next year. But if ready, maybe he plays at some point this year as well. And so we get that 5th-year option on here. Maybe we didn't need to trade up here into the first round for this. That's very much possible. But they're going to secure it and make sure it happens, because I could see the New York Giants really valuing that. So then we got Kenneth Grant going to Kansas City. They need a nose tackle, amongst other things, but, there's time in the offseason, and that is something that they just really don't have with prior to free agency, at least on their roster, with what's going to be leaving potentially in free agency. Jack Sawyer then falls a little bit in this mock draft, and the Eagles are happy to pick that up. We know that they like to also draft in the trenches usually, so this makes some sense. That's going to bring us on to the second round, and we're going to start the second round with a trade. So now we're going to start to look at this stuff. We're not quite going to get into looking at these prospects too much, because we're still in the guys that you're probably going to be more familiar with. They're going to be talking about more. So Cleveland is going to actually trade out here. If Cleveland wants Jalen Milroe, I think that they can feel fairly comfortable falling back a few spots if a nice offer comes their way. With Tennessee and Buffalo sitting there ahead of Las Vegas, their target may not make to them. They know that Buffalo, Tennessee could be teams interested in drafting a wide receiver, and they're looking to complete making this offense something that that Sam Darnold can walk into, feel comfortable with, and not get bad Sam Darnold and get good Sam Darnold. That's very important, so we need to surround him with weapons. It's just like Jared Goff. They just need good weapons around them, and they're not going to necessarily heighten the talent around them, but they can work with good talent and be successful most of the time. So that's what we're looking to do as Las Vegas. So let's get them up here. Oh, look at that. It has them interested in moving up. It's going to cost Las Vegas here roughly picks 37.73 to get 33.94 and actually a future 4th on top of that. No, my bad. Make that a future 5th. You're going to cost us a little bit to make this happen, Las Vegas. So Cleveland, once again, pretty confident in moving back here, and don't think they're going to lose out on their target with what the quarterback situation now looks like. And Las Vegas moves up here to grab Matthew Golden, which I think could work nicely in this offense. Not the best fit in the world, but a good one. But that the Vikings had moved back, acquired some capital. There you go. That's what their new board looks like here. And they're going to be able to get Omarr Hampton here. Running back, not going to really go into too much detail, but also not somebody who gets a whole lot of, talked about a whole lot with, Ashton Genty running back at the top of the board. Omarr Hampton's a guy who could slip into the first round, potentially. Definitely worthy of a draft pick here in the early portion of the second round. A very good running back, just not overly exciting, so that's part of the reason that nobody talks about him. Also, he played at UNC. There wasn't a whole lot of NFL draft types of talent coming out of UNC this year, so just not a whole lot of buzz around him. But anybody who knows much about this draft also knows that he is like the second best running back in this draft class for most people's opinions. That's going to bring us on to Tennessee. And we're going to go with a wide receiver who I really like a lot. Some people do not like as much. As you can see, I'm having to go down here for Trey Harris, who a lot is going to depend on how well he does in Indianapolis, and a lot is also going to depend upon how well this next player does in Indianapolis. Trey Harris is going to be talked about, especially by me, so we'll hold off on that one, talking too much about it, but just a big-bodied wide receiver there in Tennessee. And remember, we took Cam Ward in the first round, so that'd be a nice target to add to this offense for him, in need of that, help him feel more comfortable. Buffalo Bills coming up onto the clock. Going to take Princely Umanmielen, another guy who I tend to be a little bit high on, not compared to everybody. Also, opinions are very varied on him, but part of the reason that he might be going later in the draft, and maybe he could be based on talent, is some character concerns for him. But I do think some of those concerns, unless they're worse than I'm aware of, could be wiped away based on how he does in Indianapolis as well. So I'll be very interested to see how he does in Indianapolis. I think that will have a big impact on exactly how highly I think of him or not. Bringing on Cleveland, we already talked about this. We know where they're going. They're going to grab Jalen Milroe. Bad pub lately, but still a guy who, I could see Cleveland taking a bet on here. And you look at what they did. They kind of built this out here. They took Justin Fields in free agency, brought him in, probably going to be their guy. Once again, Jalen Milroe sit and learn behind Justin Fields. Will he learn good things or bad things? Can't say for sure. But nonetheless, that keeps some sort of fluidity too in case of injury, etc. between the two of them, and just build an offense that if Jalen Milroe ever gets the opportunity to come into, if you do hit on him, you build that offense that he is going to succeed in, because that needs to be built. And so I think there's enough similarities between the Justin Fields, Jalen Milroe. Let's bring us on to the New England Patriots, who are going to take Derek Harmon, somebody who you see me take him at the end of the second round. Maybe he doesn't go that high. Maybe he does. So New England's going to get him here. They need help along that defensive line, and just based on talent, that was where I went for them. Chicago here, pick 39. Going to also be taking one of these edge rushers that could go in the first round. I did that yesterday, too. Donovan Ezeiruaku here, going to Chicago, so you can see being patient pays off for them. They get a guy with plenty of talent here that will come in and be very helpful as an edge rusher, I'm sure, in the second round, and they were able to help their offensive line in the first round. You look at the guards and stuff that's available here right now, it's a little bit barren. There's other guys. Donovan Jackson maybe is viewed as a guard that maybe you'd be fine with him here, and edge rusher earlier. That could flip, but no guarantee that Donovan Jackson's here as well. I just think it makes sense for some of these teams in the first half of the draft to pass on edge rusher and get him in the second round. That's what Chicago does here, and I think it pays off pretty nicely. Then we've got the Saints on the clock, and they're going to go with Jaden Higgins here. So you can find the complete hauls for every team down in the description, by the way. That is down there for you as a nice resource. I'll hopefully remember to put that as a comment on this video, because I didn't say that earlier on. But in terms of Jaden Higgins, now we're going to get into guys. I'm going to start to talk about them soon. Jaden Higgins is a 6'4", 217-pound wide receiver. A good sized wide receiver, something that they need there in New Orleans. He has quick feet, solid wiggle for a man of his size, and he is a polished product in terms of his football IQ and his route tree, I should say. He is a big radius catch guy, obviously. I like to think of him as if Drake London and Michael Wilson had a baby. He is the love child of Drake London and Michael Wilson, is my best kind of comp. Obviously, that's a high-end comp there. There's no guarantee that you get that, but I do think that his floor is pretty high, so I think Jaden Higgins a nice addition here to New Orleans wide receiver room. So, Chicago here up on the clock again, and they get, like I said, Revel here, who is cornerback, who has coming in with, I believe, torn ACL. I think that might not actually be confirmed, so I don't want to say that with all fact. But Revel coming in, probably I don't think goes in the first round because of that injury. But a steal in the second round could go. If he had not been injured, a guy would be going top 20-ish area, most likely. New York Jets on the clock at pick 42, and Kansas City has spent the past two drafts taking second and third round tackle talent, and it has not worked out yet. And I don't have the highest faith in that working out in-house. it makes all the sense for them to give their second round draft pick from last year. Is it Blake Fisher? I feel like that's Houston. The guy that they drafted, Suamatoa, something like that. Their draft pick last year was a guy who was always going to be a project, and he just got forced into the role this year earlier than they had wanted to put him into it, I'm sure, or earlier than anticipated when drafting him. So, Suamatoa, right? So they might still have faith in that in year 2 being something that is serviceable and reliable. I wasn't as high up on him, thought more of a third-round talent, still a raw prospect that needed some development. This time, though, I have them saying, we're going to get this right for sure. We can't go through this again, and have them trading up. So Kansas City is going to make a big leap up from pick. Now it's 63. I had 64, but 63, 66, moving up to get 42, and I believe 92 here from the Jets doing a swap. Not quite 92. 108. Make this more palatable for the Jets to do, because that's a big jump back. So the Jets giving up that, going to get 63 and 66, however, in return. So that'll be nice, and you'll see what they do with that. We got a plan. We got a plan, baby, for all these teams. So Kansas City now on the clock, and who is their target? None other than a guy who might be falling here. Not so high up on this board, but I think he's going to go back up, or maybe, I think he'll probably go back up to like 44-ish for Trevor Sikkema. He has talked about being a little bit higher on him again after Senior Bowl activities. He didn't have a great Senior Bowl, but he had more good than bad at the Senior Bowl, and I think proved what we really wanted to be proved was just that he should be reliable to be out there and not be bad in year 1 as a decent floor at least. So Azareye'h going to be that guy we're going to bring in here and just make it work. He's going to be our guy. Left tackle, you can't always find those in the draft that can start year 1. And I think Azareye'h is somebody who, if you need to, you can rely on him at left tackle year 1. San Francisco on the clock. They're going to take advantage of a guy who some might consider be falling at this point in Nick Scourton. And just a big edge rusher. You should be hearing about him in the offseason. He's not talking about too much. I'm not too high up on him myself. That brings us on to the second pick here for the Dallas Cowboys. And they're going to go with a linebacker that plenty of people think could go in the first round. I don't have a linebacker with a first-round draft pick. First-round grade in this draft. And as a matter of fact, Jihaad Campbell is actually not my number 1 linebacker. He has a lot of people's, but I actually like Carson Schwessinger here from UCLA a little bit more than Jihaad Campbell. I have him back-to-back in my top 50. There isn't much separating the two, but I just liked the ceiling, we'll say, of Carson Schwessinger a little bit more. I thought... let's see, I wrote down a little bit of information about him for you. 6'1", 223 pounds. He's an instinctual player, and I think that's very important when you're in the middle of a defense. Safeties and linebackers, you kind of got the whole field left and right of you. That the instincts matter. You need to be a step ahead of the quarterback as often as possible. And I compared some of Carson Schwessinger's tape to that of a certain safety, Troy Polamalu. Obviously, this is a super high comparison. He's not Troy Polamalu. I don't think he'll ever be Troy Polamalu. In fact, he's a linebacker. He's not a safety. But what Troy Polamalu did around the line of scrimmage in terms of his ability to jump the snap was otherworldly. And I saw a little bit of that from Carson Schwessinger, who is a very, very elite type of pass rusher from the linebacker position. And, I mean, if you can do that kind of thing, if you can get in the backfield in such a flash that the ball is pretty much hasn't even reached the quarterback and you're already half the distance to him, that's going to destroy plays. That is a game-changing type of player, and I think that there is some of that upside in Carson Schwessinger. Can he do it at the rate, to the ability that Troy Polamalu did it? Probably not. Obviously, probably not. That doesn't happen, but I really do like that ability, and he's good enough in coverage, so you can keep him out there 3 downs, I think. So, Carson Schwessinger, really, really talented, high upside player, in my opinion, that I'm willing to take a shot on. Indianapolis can take a shot on that here. Atlanta should remain open to trading back in the opportunity, if the opportunity presents itself, and it needs to be where they're going to be gaining more capital in this draft, not looking for any future capital. Baltimore could have a preferred defensive lineman that they want, that they're going to jump up for, because I think we're entering an area of the draft where you see interior defensive linemen are going to be needs for some of these teams. So Baltimore has plenty of capital in this draft, as you will see shortly. So they're going to take pick 59 and 91 and give that to Atlanta, who's willing to do that to, once again, just getting a little bit more capital in this draft overall. And they're happy to make that happen for that case. So Baltimore comes up here, and the offensive linemen here that I have all bundled up in my top 50, it's just which flavor do you want, are going to be Alfred Collins, Joshua Farmer, Omarr Norman-Lott, Tyleik Williams up here. I chose my thought best fit based on historical decisions that the Baltimore has made. Also, Darius Alexander, some people love him. Deion Walker could be another guy that definitely would have fit their mold enough. But those two aren't quite in my next tier personally. So going off of my next tier, I went Alfred Collins. I really liked him a lot. And we're going to get another interior defensive lineman off the board. So good job, Baltimore, of reading the room. And we're going to take Omarr Norman-Lott off of the board here for Arizona, because he's going to give them some pass rush. So let's just cover both of those picks, Alfred and Omarr. One thing that they have in common is that neither one of them has a high production profile in college. Omarr Norman-Lott, part of a big time rotation there in Tennessee, that a lot of those guys, that's kind of like the knock on them, is they don't have the production because they were part of a rotation. They were on the field less than others. They were able to stay fresh because of that as well. That always helps. Alfred Collins is also another guy, doesn't have a high production profile. Alfred Collins is an unconfirmed 6'5", 320 pounds, so that's why I think he was a match out of those names for Baltimore, because he's a big guy. They like big defensive linemen. He's a better run defender than he's a pass rusher. He does a great job of keeping his eyes on the backfield, was something that I noticed. He's really good at diagnosing plays, and he gets his hands up to knock balls down when he is in a pass rush situation and he doesn't get there. He just does a good job of making the best out of his skill set. And once again, that is keeping his eye on the backfield. And then he has the tools to disengage from the blocks and make the play in the backfield against the run, or be there to help stuff the run, be there as a just an assistant on the play. So he might not always make the play, he might not always finish it, but I think he's helping others around him to finish it as well. And I ultimately just really like the tool set going forward, where he could become a highly productive player, I believe. And then Omarr Norman-Lott, too, really loved the skill set. 6'2", 295 pounds, 18.8% pass rush win rate. Almost 1 in every 5 snaps, he's winning his snap. That's excellent. That's basically every 6 downs, he's going to be affecting the tempo of the quarterback in some way or another. It's an excellent pass rush win rate, and you love that from the interior. The quickest way to get to the quarterback is on the interior of the defense. He's very quick and explosive, as you would imagine, at the snap. Does not let down there, and he plays with some nasty in him. This could be good, could be bad. Well, not something I can figure out. We'll leave that up to the interview process to figure out for these teams. But he was suspended for half a game in 2023 for an in-game fight. There's plenty of great players around the league that happens from time to time. Mike Evans has been a part of some in-game fights and has been ejected from games before. Doesn't mean they're bad guys off the field or anything. You do want to make sure that he's not going to be somebody who off the field could get in trouble, and then you've wasted this pick, of course, just because of that extra little nasty that he has on the field. Hopefully that's where it is and it remains. I don't think he has any off-field incidents to suggest otherwise publicly, known. Let's bring the Dolphins up onto the field. They're going to take a man who I'm not going to talk about too much because a lot of people like him even as first-round talent, so you should be hearing about him in the offseason. I'm not as high on him, but still fairly, fine here. Most likely safety will be a need for Miami. So they get Nick Emmanwori anyways here in the first round. They remain patient at safety. And I think that that's the smart way to go because I'm not as high up on Malachi Starks as others. Cincinnati up onto the clock next, and this is where we're going to see a little bit more influence from Daniel Jeremiah's big board. We're going to go with Donovan Jackson here, listed as a tackle. We're drafting him as a guard. That is a need for Cincinnati with free agency if they do not retain Cody Ford. Cody Ford is a free agent. assuming he leaves Cincinnati, they're going to need help along the interior of that offensive line. And I thought that Donovan Jackson could be a fit if they would like to put an emphasis on improving their run game, because that is where Donovan thrives the most. And then depending on exactly what you think of his pass blocking, I think determines how high up or how low he might go in the draft. I thought it might be a little bit of a concern, so maybe he's a little bit lower on my board than here. But if Cincinnati feels comfortable with it, and if they want to put that emphasis on the run game, I think a great choice here. And once again, talking about the guards, we're on the, according to Daniel Jeremiah at least, we're in like the top 50 guard situation here, whereas the talent starts to fall off there. And guards value is on the rise in the NFL. Speaking of teams that could use guards, Seattle could use some help there, but they're not going to here yet. They're going to wait. They're going to be patient, true to something that they might do in the real draft. And they're going to take a cornerback here. Maxwell Harrison, get at the front of this cornerback room, this next group of cornerbacks that'll start to go here in the mid portion of the second round to third round. Maxwell Harrison is a really good ball skills, high IQ, instinctual cornerback, and I like him quite a bit. I think he's got some decent size, 6'1", 186 there as well. Some people think he could go into the first round. I was very high up on him. Definitely like him a lot, and wouldn't argue with a team if they took him at the very end of the first round. He's a good option. Tampa Bay on the clock next at pick 51, and Tampa Bay is looking at linebacker, interior offensive line, safety. You just look at this. We just had a couple of guards go as of late, or at least more recently. We had a guard go. Some safeties, some linebackers going. That tier is just kind of started to dry up at those positions, so I think they're going to feel okay falling back to pick 55, which is going to be the Green Bay Packers, who are going to be moving up here. So pick 55, 123. To move up to pick 51. Green Bay Packers are in a situation this year where I think that they should be willing to walk away without 9 draft picks and even without 7 draft picks and try and just get some big targets of theirs. That's not necessarily their style, but they don't need to continue to get younger. They need to start to get better at this point in time. So that's kind of what we're going to do. Green Bay Packers are going to target help at the wide receiver position in Jack Besh. His best role might be as a power slot at 6'1", 214, in which case maybe we didn't need to spend the capital to do that. But I think that if you're a true believer in Jack Besh, and some are, and I am, that he can play as a true X receiver. And that's kind of as much of a role as I have him getting drafted for in Green Bay as any. True X, you can move him around. He can play in the power slot on some snaps, especially in this wide receiver room. You can move these guys around. Jack Besh fits right in there. Jack Besh should be somebody who, this scheme, the Shanahan-type scheme of offense, from this tree, that might value Jack Besh and his abilities more. Big wide receiver, can block well, pitches in all facets of the game there as a wide receiver. So I think Green Bay could be a team that will fall in love with him, and maybe we'll find it worth jumping up for him. Denver Broncos up on the clock here. They're going to take a guy I really, really love in Cam Skattebo. Or is it Skattebo? Cam Skattebo, simply put, he is the kind of guy that you want on your roster due to the energy and dog that he brings each and every time that he gets the ball. And he can help in all 3 phases, making him worth this type of draft pick. He can run the ball well. He can catch and run the ball well after he catches it. And he's reliable enough, as reliable as you'll find for the most part coming out of the NCAA, coming out of the college ranks at the NFL level as a blocker on passing downs. So 3-down guy, some concerns. He uses up so much energy in the game that sometimes he tires himself out, I think, by the end of games. So that's one of the bigger concerns, but I could see Sean Payton absolutely falling in love with him. And it's not like Sean Payton has shied away from, using multiple backs, so that could alleviate some of the concerns about him having to play every down of the game and, tiring himself out. But I think that he brings the kind of energy and mean and just every down attitude that Sean Payton could respect and want. To bring us on to another almost system match as well as anything here that I really wanted to touch on is Savion Williams going to Pittsburgh. Savion Williams is probably the player of Arthur Smith's wet dreams, as he's either on the high end, the love child of DK Metcalf and Cordarrelle Patterson, Or, if he doesn't pan out, maybe he's the love child of Chase Claypool and Laviska Shenault. A 6'5" Deebo Samuel, you say? Maybe. So, 6'5" Deebo Samuel, that's my own addition into this, but I have to credit the NFL Draft Stock Exchange, a YouTube channel. If you don't follow them, you definitely should. They put out some great content. That's Trevor Sikkema and Connor Rogers. Connor Rogers of NBC, Trevor Sikkema of PFF have their own YouTube channel that they do. They do college, they do draft stuff year-round, and it's really, really good content. Love them. Don't always agree with them. Don't always disagree with them. And so that was their comp. I just wanted to give the proper credit there. Savion Williams, I think, could be a great fit in Seattle and in Pittsburgh. And a large part of the reason why you're not going to see me taking a wide receiver for them in the first round too often this offseason. That and Roman Wilson. So that's going to bring us on to pick 54. And they're going to go with one of those other flavors of interior defensive linemen that I talked about. That's kind of all just grouped up in my rankings. Joshua Farmer of Florida State, another Jeremiah guy as well, and I'm in agreement. I really loved the tape on Joshua Farmer. Some maybe a little bit of size concerns, 6'3", maybe not as much. He's not that tall. He's not 6'3". I think he's more like 6'1.5" if I recall. 318. Don't quote me on that, and I'm not looking it up at this point. If you're really curious, you can look it up. He was at the Senior Bowl or Shrine, but I think he's at the Senior. His official measurements are out there. They just hadn't updated in the system here yet. And then we got Tampa Bay on the clock after they had fallen back, and they're going to take my favorite, and not only my favorite, but also my number one safety on my big board in Andrew Mukuba, which, by the way, you can get my big board. There's links up in the description or down in the description to where you can find my big board. Is up on Discord server as well as up on the website, www.theFFWatch.com. So Andrew Mukuba is my number one, but there is a caveat to this. So he needs to be put into the right place to succeed. It must be a zone-heavy scheme, and Todd Bowles runs a zone-heavy scheme. So this would be a match that would work out a team that should have a little bit higher interest in him maybe than other teams. He can be that rangy player at the top of the defense who won't let anything past him and can come down as well as an assist. I love Andrew Mukuba, and as you can see, defense back, definitely a need there in Tampa Bay, and would be a very nice pairing there. Buffalo Bills up onto the clock here at pick 56, and I got to say the name correctly. So a lot of people thought it was Azareye'h. Apparently it is Azareye'h. Azareye'h Thomas is the current pronunciation. If that changes again, I'll let you know. But that is what we, as a draft community, have been told is the correct pronunciation, is my understanding at this point of time. Azareye'h Thomas of Florida State, bigger cornerback, really nice fit. You'll see him talked about plenty. He is a guy who enough people think could sneak into the first round, so not going to spend my time talking about that one here at pick 57. We do have Houston, who is going to be lured off of this pick, not necessarily them opening up the phones as much as them just getting a call, and that call is going to be from Buffalo. And Buffalo, who just picked at pick 57, now interested in coming back up. They couldn't get everything. Going to give pick 62 and 130. You can see they've got a nice amount of draft capital here, and they're a team that's close, so it makes sense for them to, make a move for guys who they believe in this draft at times. And didn't they already move back once too, right? So now they're going to move up with some of this extra capital. And so with this pick, Mac Hollins, Amari Cooper, current, at this point, previous wide receivers of, not technically at this point. They're still on the roster until the new year begins, but they are going to be free agents available out on the market. Don't know if Buffalo will retain them or not. And Elic Ayomanor, wide receiver out of, I don't have that memorized yet. Stanford, yes, Stanford boy, is a bigger target wide receiver, traditional big physical perimeter wide receiver who can help to keep defenses honest, which I think is really important for this offense to operate. And I believe that his addition to this roster would also allow them to better utilize last year's pick in Keon Coleman and put him in better situations to succeed, which is, I think, part of the reason why they brought in Amari Cooper, right? So there we go. Buffalo, back-to-back, Azareye'h Thomas, Elic Ayomanor helping specialty players on both sides of the ball. Brings Carolina up onto the clock, and Carolina is going to take... This is a right-in pick. I originally screwed this up. I think I originally took an edge rusher, and they already took one. By the way, did I mention all of the draft picks for each team are down in the in the comments? Not in the comments, in the description of this. So Carolina is going to take Xavier Watts, safety out of Notre Dame. Carolina's safety room pre-free agency looks like this. One person. They've got one man, and that man was an undrafted free agent last year who played all right when he needed to, but he's also played all right for an undrafted free agent. He didn't play magnificently. He wasn't a top cornerback by any means in the league, and they need more bodies in their secondary. They're going to take some bodies in free agency for sure. You can't get away with just the draft, but Watts is a high floor safety who can help from anywhere on the field, and he brings a good amount of energy to the game as a high-motored playmaker, with good instincts and game IQ. His biggest issue is that he can play too recklessly, and he can whiff on some of the easier plays that he should just be making. He just comes in all hot and bothered and screws up the play. So that happens from time to time. Want to clean that up, but otherwise, Xavier Watts, one of those guys that I think for a young up-and-coming team can really be, really bring some juice to the unit and help to make a unit that, has been pretty poor for a little while now start to look a lot better. Atlanta Falcons are going to end up taking here. I originally had him with TJ Sanders, and thank you, Atlanta Falcons fan, for helping me fix my needs list. And I read the comments for that reason. Otherwise, I wouldn't read them because some of you are jerks. But I do read them because I want constructive criticism, and sometimes I agree with you, sometimes I don't. But in this case, brought up a good point about my errors of the way here. The Atlanta Falcons do need help along their defensive line still, even though they invested in the last draft. Their nose tackle room after free agency or prior to free agency, they're going to be losing their nose tackles. So that's where they need help. And I think Tyleik Williams is a guy who we just need to add a little bit of weight to. He's on the lighter end for a nose tackle, but he is that moldable piece of clay coming off of a bit of a down year here, but he is a high-energy, powerful guy who can work out as nose tackle as is. And if we just want him to stick there long-term, we don't really need to use that flexibility, then we'll definitely just want to put some weight on him, but we'll get that weight added to him in a healthy manner, so that way his athletic upside remains a plus for him. We don't want to just add a bunch of weight onto him and ruin that, that power that he brings with his speed to power kind of abilities. So Tyleik Williams going to Atlanta here, just rebuilding that front seven there in Atlanta in this draft. And then we waited on edge for Detroit, and they're going to end up getting... They could be interested in Landon Jackson. That would make a lot of sense, but I actually have them being interested in the other Ohio State edge rusher, in JT Tuimoloau. I said that a little bit off, Tuimoloau. The other edge rusher in Ohio State, who is in less deep edge rushing classes, one who would be going, I think, at the top of the second round without much question. He's a high floor guy, very high IQ, who can contribute from day one, I think. And that's what this team will possibly need with Aiden Hutchinson recovering from his injury. And then, if Za'Darius Smith gets injured at any point throughout the season, or if they just want to keep him on the field a little bit less, maybe use Za'Darius Smith as more of the rushing down kind of guy, JT more of the early down kind of guy, they can try to help keep Za'Darius Smith a little bit healthier and fresher as he continues to age, but a guy who has an injury history nonetheless. So bringing some depth into that edge room for the short term is also important. And going into the long term, we can't rely on Za'Darius Smith in the long term. We need our next guy here. So I think JT Tuimoloau, very nice fit here opposite of Aiden Hutchinson for the long term. If we can squeeze the most out of him, that could turn out really well. And then that's going to bring us on to the Washington Commanders, who are going to grab a wide receiver. They have two wide receivers as of entering free agency in their wide receiver room. Obviously, they'll add something. One of those wide receivers is Luke McCaffrey, who I think was woefully overdrafted. I think they they missed on that one. I don't think they'll ever get back a third-round picks of value from Luke. Maybe they will. Maybe they will. He's definitely a raw prospect. I keep trying to look up Luke, but what I'm trying to do is look up Jalen Royals, wide receiver who I really like here. And for Washington, I think a good fit. So Washington has 2 wide receivers on their roster, woefully overdrafted. I think that they'll try to bring Olamide Zaccheaus back. So that's a slot wide receiver of theirs where we saw a great connection between him and Jaden Daniels developing, especially at the end of the year. So I think that's something that we want to foster and continue, and that will take a little bit of heat off of us in terms of having to fill that role. So probably bring him back. That should not impact Jalen Royals, despite the fact that he did play at in the slot more his last year in college. He's not a slot-specific guy. 5'11 and a half, 210 pounds. He's got good size to be your prototypical Z wide receiver in the NFL. He's a quarterback-friendly target who will be where he needs when he's supposed to be there. And that is what you want for a young quarterback like Jaden Daniels, to help them to continue to develop in a positive manner, to help them progress instead of taking a step back, which we see often enough. Second-year quarterbacks take that step back. We don't want that. We need to continue to progress forward, and I think Jalen Royals be a really, really good pick here in the second round to help that happen, and should be able to come in and contribute pretty early on. You know, one of those guys who by the halfway point of the year is a surefire part of this offense. That's going to bring us on to Houston, who originally I had them taking Tyleik Williams. Actually, I like this fit. This worked out better anyways, having to move Tyleik Williams up, because TJ Sanders could definitely go higher. You see 37 on this big board, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that ranking. I have him in my top 50 on my big board. He is just a part of this interior defensive line group that I have very close to one another, and he ends up being the one that doesn't get drafted as early as others. That's how players fall. And here we have Houston taking advantage of that situation. He is a guy who could go in the back end of the first round, and he's an elite 3-tech pass rusher, great penetrator, gonna cause some issues, and really would be a nice addition to this Houston front seven. So I love the fit there too for TJ Sanders to Houston, and their patience pays off here at pick 62. But they even grabbed a little extra capital, right, in doing so. That brings us on to the Jets pick here. Remember, Kansas City had traded up. Jets got picks 63 and 66. Jets fan, I will let you know what pick 66 was as well. But first, we need to complete our plan. Now, if you recall, I gave you guys the one, the only, the chef, Russell Wilson, right? You know, he's got to be a chef, because you got to let him cook. All right, Dillon Gabriel it is, guys. Look, Dillon Gabriel, he is 5'11". He is the Russell Wilson of this generation. Probably going to get taken in the third round. Probably get taken with that pick 66 in this scenario that the Jets acquired, instead of being taken in the second round, just like your boy Russell Wilson was. I think, you know, if you wanted Dillon Gabriel to sit behind somebody and learn, and you have some faith in what he could become, I mean, it's a good match. It's not going to cost you too much here if it doesn't work out for you. If he comes into the building and you're like, gosh, we made a mistake here. This isn't going to work. Well, you still got Russell Wilson for the year, and next year's draft, now we're going to attack quarterback there, hopefully. That's the situation here. So that's what it is here. Dillon Gabriel impressing for the most part throughout some of the process so far in the offseason. A lot of people liked him coming into the process as well. I think probably a guy we do see go in the third round would make sense. But that height, 5'11", pushes him back on my board a little bit. It is very concerning. But we know offenses can be made to work around these guys. The other draft pick that I have that maybe we would have taken here is cornerback Darian Porter of Iowa State. They've got some guys this offseason who should be a great fit in this new Steve Wilks defense of the New York Jets, as he is a best fit in a zone-heavy scheme. Darian Porter, that is. At 6'2.5", 197 pounds, he has long arms, good ball skills, and good long speed. Surprisingly, at his size, he struggles in man coverage and is not of any help against the run, but we should be able to get away with that. He's still learning the position. He comes in with a pretty good floor here, and he's got a fairly high potential, ceiling potential for him as well. So Darian Porter, nice grab here at the end. You can see 50 on Trevor Sikkema's board here. I don't want to draft him right now, though, because the Eagles are on the board. Final pick of this draft. Once again, reminder, every team's draft, including the quarterback that I had them taking in free agency, is available down in the description of the video. Xavier Restrepo, wide receiver. We're going to stick with the wide receivers here, and the Philadelphia Eagles are going to take Xavier Restrepo. He is a guy I can't put the full mock draft. You're going to have to go look. At least you get a reminder of the first round while I finish this up. So, after the Super Bowl, maybe the Eagles are comfortable moving forward with Jahan Dotson. If not, Xavier Restrepo provides Jalen Hurts with a security blanket for when things break down. Just help this offense be a little bit more consistent. Obviously, Saquon Barkley being there helped them take that step. But still, you saw at times throughout the season, sometimes specifically the passing attack, could grow stale, could grow a little bit inconsistent, and that could cause drives to end suddenly, and you don't want that. Sometimes, like I said, this offense has struggled. You bring in a guy, a safety blanket, who I consider to be a less electric version of Josh Downs. That's a pretty good comp for me because I loved Josh Downs. I still love Josh Downs. I think he's done well in the NFL. Xavier Restrepo, like I said, less electric, but brings some of the same skill sets of Josh Downs, reliability as Josh Downs, and everything like that. So, I think he would be a nice addition if they still feel like they need to get some help here at the slot, which they've put a fair amount of resources into trying to shore that up over the past couple of years. So there we go. That is it for this mock draft. I'll get another one next week. Next week we will be looking at letting the defensive line and edge rushers fall back as far as we can. I talked about that a little bit in this draft. We saw a little bit of that happen in this draft, and that was my actual influence when I made this draft. I was like, oh, I got to do one like that. So, all right, peace out, everybody. Appreciate you. I know this was a longer one, but really wanted to just touch on some players. Peace out.